we'll get you next week. No, I have another idea of what I wanted to do today. So I kind of like am in this mindset today because we had our hiring manager panel discussion, and it became like pretty clear that hiring managers think in a really like specific way, and there probably hasn't been a lot of insight for you as students, and it would be helpful to kind of talk maybe a little bit more of what they're looking for at specific stages. So I would like to surprise a couple of people and do a like hiring manager review of portfolios, resumes, and GitHub accounts. And I'll just like screen share and talk through what I'm looking at and what I'm thinking about, and go through a process like that I have done a whole bunch of times for a whole bunch of people. So what's really top of mind for me is GitHub accounts. I've seen like a real problem with a lot of Lambda School graduates, frankly, like when they graduate, people who have been out of the program for a long time and are struggling to find a job, like one of the things that happens almost every time is when I pull up their portfolio to help them out or check out what they're looking at. I pull up their GitHub account and I see like a bunch of immediate red flags. So if you know what those red flags are, you can keep them off your profile and have better odds, because that's going to be one of the first things that a hiring manager looks at, and probably something that nobody has ever talked to you about. So has anybody ever, like show of hands, has anybody ever talked to you about a GitHub and how to optimize that to be attractive to an employer? No. Okay. Who wants to go first? Somebody drop a link to their GitHub. And
trying to go.
Chris, you're up?
Yeah, I'm up. I'm down for that.
All right, Chris, drop me a link and I will pull it up and share my screen and we'll talk about it.
Cool.
GitHub.com/Christopher Beards. All right, where's my screen share button? Oh, Chris, you are cheating, my friend. All right. Here we go. Okay. Everybody sees my screen? There's not a bunch of faces blocking anything? All right. So we are going to pretend like I just had Chris apply to my job. I'm the manager that's going to be interviewing him. He sent me a link to his GitHub and his resume and portfolio and whatever else. And I just barely clicked on it for the first time. Now, the very first thing that I look at is this right here. This is your contribution graph. For those of you who don't know how this works, you can click on this link and get a breakdown of how GitHub counts contributions and puts green squares on your little graph. The biggest thing is that whenever you create an issue, open a pull request, or push a commit to GitHub, and that push a commit is the important part that gets left out. And then there's some requirements about the repository that you push to, some notes if things are not being shown up, some troubleshooting here. The email address from your Git config needs to match the ones on your GitHub profile. You can have more than one email address on your GitHub profile, so you can have a work email and a personal email for different computers, whatever. This page will explain how to make sure your squares get green when you're writing code, but the very first thing I look at when I'm reviewing a candidate's GitHub profile is their contribution graph. And what happens a lot of times with early career individuals, and specifically people who are fresh out of school or a program like Lambda School, is you will be able to look at this box and tell exactly the day they graduated, because that will be the last green square. So, Chris, you're still actively working on your labs project, and it looks like you're writing a lot of code lately, which is great. You will want to make your very highest priority from the day you finish Lambda School until the day that you are working full-time for somebody as a software engineer. No matter what else you do in a day, make sure that you write and push some code to GitHub and keep this thing green. Because I cannot even tell you how many hiring managers I've spoken to in my current position at Lambda School that have said that, this is the first thing they look at, and this will immediately disqualify a candidate. The number is high. So make this your top priority while you're job searching. Once you have a job and once you have experience on your resume, this whole thing doesn't matter at all. It's just until that time, this is your main signal for an employer as to how engaged you are in coding. And it's a really, really easy way to tell people who are learning new things or trying to keep their skills sharp and people who aren't. And this is of anything on your portfolio site, your resume, your GitHub, the first package that you send to an employer, cover letter, anything else. This I don't know, what is this, 400 pixels tall area on your GitHub profile is the very most important thing. Keep it green. Do whatever it takes. So now that I've looked over Chris's GitHub contribution graph looks great. A couple of these days, he's been pretty engaged. The next thing that I'll do is kind of take a look at some of the repositories. Now you have a configuration in your profile where you can edit what projects show up here if you want to feature your repositories. And I recommend you go through and configure that to be what you think are your most impressive. So little knock on Chris here, because this is just the default view. These are probably what I think they have some algorithm that likes whatever you contributed to most often, most recently goes here by default, but you can highlight a repository to be featured and they'll show up in this little area. Other things that we would look for, you notice Chris's GitHub URL is just his name, which is the best possible GitHub URL, just like it's the best possible email address. You don't want to see something like DragonRider69 at GitHub as their URL. You want to see something professional. So Chris has a good professional looking headshot here. He's, smiling and looks nice. He's not, there's nothing inappropriate or weird here, which is a pretty low bar, but it is an important bar. It also is not the default ASCII art alien thing, but he's actually configured this and uploaded a picture. He's got his name, and then this right here is a section on your in your profile account settings where you can put a website URL. So if you have a portfolio site, you could link to this here. If you have a employer, you can link to whoever you work for here. Chris has chosen to put his LinkedIn here, so that's fine. A portfolio site would probably be best. A LinkedIn is acceptable. Your World of Warcraft guild would probably not be a good one. And believe it or not, I've seen that from a student, so don't do that. So I'm going to give Chris a follow, and let's dig in and look a little closer here. So ideally, there would be a nice featured project here for me to check out. Something like a capstone project would be great. An impressive side project would also be really great. Anything open source that you've written or published would be really great. Got a chat message. What about bio? I would say a bio is an easy thing to look over, and I don't really care about it, and I don't think I've ever cared about it. If you've got something interesting to write there, throw it in, but make sure you're strategic about it. So Like you would say something in your bio about how you're a front-end engineer that's really excited about React and working with open source or something like that would be a good bio. But like, don't write about hobbies or don't write about career switching or don't write about anything else like that. Like you want to be targeted to very code specific, hard technical stuff if you're going to write a bio here. So because Chris doesn't have a highlighted repository, what I would probably do is just scroll down here to check out his contribution activity and see what he's been working on most recently. So like this is going to be something like you'll want to be strategic about. Like you'll want your most impressive projects, the things you want hiring partners or hiring managers to look at first, to show up here in your featured repositories. And then when you have something that like is a work in progress, okay. So there's two repositories we're going to look at here. We're going to look at this Lyric Finder thing, and then we're going to look at CS10 restaurant POS. So because I'm the owner of this repository, I'm getting a message about security warnings. Risk is tolerable to this project. Great. So I'm reviewing this as if Chris has applied for a job. So I land over on this project. The first thing I'm going to look at is the README to see what it is. It looks like you guys have been generating documentation, which is cool. Oh, good job. So I love that there is API documentation in your README. What's even better than a whole bunch of API documentation would be like one paragraph summary of what the project is, how to get it running, what the purpose is, and a link to the deployed version, and then like extra super ultra mega bonus points. If you integrate with a continuous deployment service like CodeShip, they'll give you a code snippet that you can drop in your README that puts a little badge that tells you whether or not the build is passing. And if you throw like all of that into a README on your capstone project, like that's going to be nails, and I'm going to be really excited to talk to you.
And if I can interject with this one, this is also a good time for me to remind everyone what is on the rubric, which is that there needs to be evidence of testing, security, and tech stack choice for these projects, because the people who are grading you on that are not going to be speaking to you. So if they can't figure that out by looking at what Holdy is looking at right now, I'm not sure what they're going to think.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Brian. Thanks. I'm pretending like I don't know anything about that rubric, but yeah, the things on the rubric are intentional. So get them in here. Cassandra asks if she should fork the capstone project to add them to the pinned repo section. Oh, it's at the bottom? Put it on top. Oh, some of it's at the bottom. Not all of it. But yeah, put it on top, Ronnie. You'll want it like the first thing in your description on your README should just be like a description of what the project is and a link to if it's deployed somewhere. I want to go back to Cassandra's question. Should we fork the capstone project that we can add them to our pinned repo section? You don't necessarily have to do that. What I would recommend is that you have, in addition to your capstone project, you just have at least like one other project that you're proud of that you can put on your pinned section, like something that you've done on your own. Those of you that have heard about Lambda Next, we have a couple project suggestions with like a pretty good breakdown of like a solid idea for you to build a project. That would be awesome for you to put in your pinned section. Something that you've done on your own. You wouldn't want to like fork a group project over unless you were, explicitly called it out in the description. Oh, it looks like there's an option to do repositories you contribute to. Perfect. So there's a way to get it pinned. Yeah, you'll want to make sure that in addition to your capstone project point here is that you'll want at least one other individual project, something that you've done on your own. Thanks for bringing that up and finding that configuration option, guys. So the next thing that we'll look at, once I've checked out the README, this README is not great. There's not a, description of what the project is. There's no link to it deployed. There is API documentation, which is awesome. To take this to the next level, there would be like a description and a link to it, and then like a CI would be like super bonus points. But the next thing I'll do is just like try to check out like the contribution part. So it looks like you guys have some like really scummy teammate here, Boomer, who's like not helping out at all. What's that about? Just kidding.
Yeah, we've repeatedly asked him for help, but he refuses to respond.
I know, like he's so worthless.
I'm just gonna have to get that guy out of here. Send him somewhere else.
I know. We get him to go make some electric.
Make him go work on trucks or something.
Ridiculous. So my first impression looking at this is pretty well balanced. I'm really proud of you, this team, CS10 Restaurant POS. Like great, tremendous work. Like this makes me super happy as an instructor. I'm psyched about this. It looks like you've had like pretty steady contribution too. This is unbelievable. So this is cool. It looks like, Christopher at 30,000 lines added and 10,000 lines removed, like you've been, committing and like a main contributor to this project, which is great. I'm checking this to make sure that it's not just like you haven't featured a project and like done one white space commit, but you've actually, done meaningful work. So I'm going to take a look at, like, if I really want to drill in, I'll take a look at your commits, the things that you've committed. A merge branch, some documentation updates. Documentation updates are really interesting to me, but as an engineering manager, the most interesting commit I could find will be something about testing. So I'm just going to scan this and see if I can see one.
Oh, it's there. Backend testing complete. I think you already passed it.
That says the word test. Oh, did I pass it? All right, we're going to have to trust out. Yeah, restaurant test. Hey, here we go. So now I'm going to check out a testing commit and see if I like the things that Chris is testing. So just the fact that there is a testing commit is like, that's a +1. I really like that. Let's take a look at what he's testing. So his first test, he's sending a post to an endpoint with a payload that looks to be boilerplate. And then he is trying to log in with that. And then he is expecting the token. And then we're dropping the database. We're okay.
It's an integration test. So we follow the procedure, register, login, and then we're going to do the things.
Yeah. So your assertion is on your response status, which is a really great place to put an expectation on an integration test. Yeah, this is great. What I like about this pattern of testing response statuses on your integration tests is this allows you to get very specific when you're writing tests that you expect to fail and you expect to handle errors in a different way. So pausing on the GitHub review and just like at a high level engineering advice review, this pattern is really great. Say that you wanted to test that you were handling expired accounts in a certain way, or that you were you had some system that you had built to prevent people from like brute forcing your login endpoint. You could, on your server, you could send back custom statuses, and then you could run your assertions based on those statuses, and then you could be testing all of your different cases. And this is like a really smart way to do that. So I love this. This is great. So had I seen this project in the wild, I found my testing commit. It was testing something important, and it was testing it in an intelligent manner. So like, I'm all thumbs at this point. Let's go check out Chris's personal project, Lyric Finder React. So a simple application to find song lyrics built with the context API. All right. So I've never seen this API before. Let's see what it looks like. Oh, cool. Got a large lyric database with some kind of API. Now, again, like if this is just some like random, practice project that's buried deep on your GitHub, none of this matters. Which is like where I got this, right? I just kind of scrolled down and found something that he'd been working on lately, and I clicked over to it. So I'm not like expecting this to be, super polished or professional. In fact, I like that this is kind of like a hobby project. Using an API like this, that's clearly just, a hobby or an interest, is a really great, strong signal for me, because it makes me feel like, okay, Christopher is like a well-rounded individual. He's got some things that he's into in his life, and then he's trying to apply his skills that he's learning at school into something that he's interested in outside. And that that's a really interesting story that it's telling. So for this to just be like a little practice project that he hasn't touched in a month, and looks like only has a couple of commits, I wouldn't expect this to be like super well polished or anything like that. If this was something he wanted to put in his featured section that he was like trying to show off or proud of, then I would just expect the same deal, like a brief description of what it is, a link to a deployed version somewhere, and that can be a Heroku app or whatever. Just someplace I can go check it out and click around would be really solid. So I can tell by just like, looking at the code files here that this is a React app. I don't really care that much about React, so I'm going to go back to Chris's profile again, see if I can find a repository in anything other than what I know he's learning at Lambda School, which is like JavaScript. Okay, so we got some Python. This is forked from Lambda School. We've got a practice project. Learning C. All right, so we've got a lot of like school challenges here. And, oh, Conway's Game of Life in React. That's interesting. Secret Guests. What's that? Sounds interesting. Knapsack. Okay. All right, if we're going to do Knapsack, I'm going to check on that. That's going to be interesting. Some more CS type stuff. Okay, so I've got a lot of school projects, and then I've got one big capstone project, which is about what I would expect from somebody in Chris's position. If he wants to make this profile like more appealing, add some more projects. Your priority would be something that you didn't learn at Lambda School would be cool. So Knapsack. What is this? Is this? Oh, this is a fork. Okay. So let's see what Chris contributed to this. Oh, whoops. I clicked the wrong button. So I'm going to check out your commits on this Knapsack problem. And this was a couple of months ago. And you might be embarrassed. I'm going to check it out. Greedy and functional. That sounds interesting to me. Okay. So Knapsack.js, we've got a const that's setting up a map. Let's sort and an output. All right. So at this point, because this was a fork, what I'm looking at, whenever you're comparing a commit or like a pull request, you've probably seen this view before. This shows like the left-hand pane is what existed before. The right-hand pane shows like what was added or removed. So we can see like he removed these 3 lines, replaced it with this. Putting a nice little output here. I'm going to talk about this in a second, but I do this to just make sure, like, you know, when you're forking a project, I want to see like what the person has like added or done on their own. So it looks like he like wrote the logic up here, and then he added this output. I really like this output, just from like as a code review. I'm pretending we're doing code review here. It's like really tempting a lot of times when you're writing a command line tool or something that's just going to like print to a screen and not, you know, be part of like a web page to half-ass this kind of thing. And like you've got line breaks in here, you've got clear labels, you've aligned everything. You're just using your string concatenation to put in your values here, but everything's like labeled and organized in like a easy to read. I imagine this prints out to your console and it looks decent. That level of attention to detail is like nice, and it's something that I would notice. So Chris, man, having looked at your GitHub, I am ready to invite you in to interview for my open positions. And this is like a really great example. Things that don't matter at all to me, like these last 3 columns, like don't spend time trying to optimize your followers or your followings or treat this like a social network, because it very much isn't. Your starred repositories can be kind of interesting. It gives me an opportunity to see like what you're looking at. So like to click over on here and see, outside of like things that you're working on, I'd really like to see open source projects that you're either following, using, or contributing to here. But I don't often click this. I mainly stick to like this overview tab, and then if I'm going to really dig deep, I'll scroll through some repositories. But most of the time here, I'm going to stick to like what you've got featured. So take advantage of this space. All right. So that's a real quick breakdown of like how I would evaluate a GitHub. And I was hoping it would be good and I could like review it a bit, but Chris, that looks great, man. Really good. Anybody have any questions about that? About GitHubs in general? I see some people typing. I'm gonna get a drink. What happens with the contribution graph if you change your email? Your GitHub account supports more than one email, so keep it in there. Like you can change the email address that like you use to log into GitHub, but then like there's a place there where you can add like other emails and you can add them in there. I don't have any commits on the weekend. Is that a red flag? No. No, it's not. It's like I'm looking for a trend there. So I pull up your contribution graph and I want to see mostly green. And if it's like, there's a white square here or there, like I understand, weekends happen, whatever. I'll tell you a secret. I've worked as a professional developer for years, and there were a lot of days where I would go to my full-time job at 9 in the morning and leave my full-time job at 5 p.m. and work for 8 hours and not push a single commit. I had white squares all the time, even while working as a professional developer. That kind of thing happens. Some problems take more than 8 hours to solve. But that needs to be the exception, and it needs to be rare. And most days you need to have green squares. And the darker the green, the better. It's light if you push like 1 to 3. It's like medium if you push 3 or 5. There's like numbers, but like the darker means like more commits on that day. Oh, Cassandra, should we fill all 6 pin slots? No, you don't have to fill all 6. Just like put them in order with like your like the thing you want the hiring manager to look at and think, damn, this person really knows what they're doing. Put that in the first spot and make sure there's like an explanation in the README of like why, you know, what it is and like why you're proud of it or whatever. And then like your second most important project next. And I'll never look at more than 2 or 3, but put them there. Yeah, and assignments from Lambda, I probably wouldn't put in your featured spot unless it was like something you like went crazy above and, you know, beyond that, because like I just assume school assignments are the kind of thing like you get an answer key for eventually. So I don't like, I mean, it's cool to see it there, but it's like not something I put a ton of weight behind, where like I would put a really like a lot of weight behind a side project that you built on your own, especially if it was in a language or a framework or tool that you were not taught at Lambda School. So if I like pull up the curriculum for Lambda School and I see anything not on that list on your personal GitHub, that's really exciting for me, because that shows this is a person who is teaching themselves or learning on their own. Jonathan says, is it better or worse your projects have nothing to do with web dev? It's indifferent, man. So there's like this one fallacy that a lot of new developers have where they say, I won't put anything incomplete or unprofessional on my GitHub. And that's the wrong attitude. Every single professional developer I've ever met, and Brian, correct me if this is different for you and your experience, but they have a long, impressive string of side projects they want to build and launch and finish that they bought a domain for, ran, you know, Rails new or create React app or whatever you kids are doing these days, and like 30% finished, and like just like this artifact of unfinished project. There's nothing embarrassing about that at all, especially if your goal was just to learn a new tool or to play with a cool API like the music project Chris had, or anything like that. And you just throw that in the README and be like, hey, this is a side project I worked on over the weekend. I wanted to play with this music API. It's great. Or, hey, I wanted to play with Rails, so here's my blog in Rails or whatever. Like, there's nothing embarrassing. In fact, it's like a badge of honor to have incomplete personal projects scattered across the internet. Like, I loved what all of the hiring managers were hammering on in our meeting today. It was just like, curious individuals are the funnest to work with, and those are the people who have the best careers. So like anything that can showcase your curiosity and your insatiable pursuit of learning is like, that's what we're looking for. Cassandra says, number of commits does not reflect my work. Of course not. I don't commit on every small change. Why would you? Only significant changes. Totally right. I don't care. Like, game the system if you have to. I mean, put it up there. Like, you notice I didn't dig into every single day to see like what you were doing. And, you know, it's just more important than the activities happening. So, and I will like put like one little caveat on that. When you get like a take-home assignment, it's pretty probable, I don't know if anybody's told you this, I might be the first one. When you're interviewing with people, sometimes they'll bring you in and they'll say, here, write some code on a whiteboard. Sometimes they'll sit you down next to somebody and say, hey, pair program with this person. Sometimes they'll just give you an email and say, here's a list of requirements for a project, build this and send it back to us. Like a take-home coding assessment. Those are really common in the interview space. Now, the things I look at during a take-home coding assessment are very different than what I just looked at on your GitHub. And maybe next time we do this, we'll talk about a take-home coding assessment. But what I'm really looking for with those is I want to see like your work habits more than anything else. Like, I don't even care about the code as much as I care about the work habits. So in that case, Cassandra, your point about committing on small changes, I want to see that you use a logical branching strategy, that like you encapsulate one feature to its own branch, that the branch has a logical name, and that whatever commit you use to pull that in has a reasonable commit message, right? I don't want to see something like fix the bug, add the thing. I want to see, adds authentication and login routes to, whatever. Like I want to see something descriptive, right? I want to see a good branch name. I used to work with this guy, and I tell this joke all the time during these, but I used to work with this guy that was so obnoxious because he would always name his branches like, it would be like Iron Man branch or like the Hulk branch. And it drove us all crazy because it was like, how in the hell are we supposed to know what Iron Man branch is going to do? And his like commit messages are always like, fix the bug, like do the thing, solve the problem. And I'm like, you're not solving any problems. You're just driving everybody crazy. Like, the best branch name is the name of a ticket on an issue tracker, and the best description of what it is, like a link to the problem, right? Like the more information that you can give about like the context of what you're working on is always the better. So that's what I'm looking at take-home tests. I want to see like your work habits. I want to see clear branching strategies. I want to see like logical names. I want to see, good patterns, because I want to see like how much of a pain is it going to be to maintain your code. Second, from like your work habits, I want to see tests. I want to see that you're testing logical things. I want to see that you're testing them in a smart way. If somebody sends you here's another secret. Who's that guy that's always like with the keys? You guys know the guy with the keys. If I was going to give you like a take-home test key of something that like, if you have a take-home test and you don't write a test for it, like just plan on not passing. Plan on like failing it immediately. That was the first place I always clicked when I was evaluating a take-home assignment, was just the testing folder. If it was blank, right in the trash. Because like a take-home assignment is an opportunity for you to showcase like your best habits. It's kind of like, it's kind of like first date for coding, and like you want to be on your best behavior, man. So you want to be on time. You want to like be clean and smell nice and like write tests. And every engineer, like there's engineers who write tests, there's engineers who don't write tests, but most engineers agree that testing is a good idea in principle. So you're going to like immediately disqualify yourself if you don't write tests on a take-home assignment. So write that down. Jason Metten says, there's a clear line on the day that I stopped being a student and started being a PM. Then there was a dark green explosion on the day I started working in labs. I wish I had known that earlier. Jason, man, you bring up a really interesting point. Caleb and I actually talked about this yesterday, because I've seen this for a few PMs. And good news for you, PMs seem to do pretty well in the job market. I don't care about a gap as much as I care, like in the middle, as much as I care about a gap on the end as a hiring manager. So now that you've got this good green explosion, like keep that going until you start your first job. And the gap in the middle won't matter. I wish I had known earlier. Yeah, that's true. I lost the channel for a second. Yeah. My squares aren't very green. Yeah, you can get greener squares. It's not a big deal. Yeah, Jason, man, just keep going. Keep your foot on the gas. Any other questions? We're like rounding the top of the hour. We can